Welcome everybody to this week's workshop. I'm Beverley Ann and I'm joined also by Chris, and you all know Chris from the Survivors Group and from the workshops. We have some people with us live in this workshop, but many others of you may be watching the recording. So if you have any questions following watching this recording, please either contact Chris through the group and she can come back to me and we can follow it up, or put a comment underneath in when you're watching this. Although would there be a chance to do that, Chris, if it was a recording?
Chance for
people to put comments underneath the video if they wanted to ask questions?
I don't think so, but they could ask questions in the group and we'll get back to them.
Fantastic. So we just got clarification. So this is the second workshop, and the last one that we did was all around basics of self-care, and it really was the basics, and it was about keeping it simple. And we're going to carry that on today when we consider boundaries and what are boundaries. And when I'm asked this question, my simple answer to that is, what is it that feels right for you and what choice do you make? Now, that sounds very simple, but when you're not used to asking yourself, what do you want and how far someone can go, we often find that we actually give other people more consideration than we do ourselves. Is that true for yourself, would you say, Chris, at any time?
Yeah.
So what is it we're thinking about? Well, with everything that we've talked about self-care, this is where it comes on with our boundaries. So we're thinking about ourselves before we're thinking of others, and that includes those nearest and dearest and even our children. So I want to make this clear, because sometimes when we're thinking about making changes, we get overwhelmed and we start to put everybody else in the idea of change. And for now, we're going to just let them all go, okay? This is all about yourself and your own boundaries. And we've just been joined by somebody else. Before we continue, Chris, do you want to put us on pause for a minute? Right, we've come back to the recording, so we have paused for a little while as we had participants join us. Now, boundaries are very important. And often what we find is cognitively, when we're thinking with our head, we're thinking about, I want to help someone and I want to, for instance, do something for them. But subconsciously, this is when we get the messages. And have you ever said yes to doing something when inside you don't actually want to do it? Think about that, because how I want to bring it back is boundaries are all about choice. Do I really want to do this? And sometimes, especially at the beginning, is a really good question to ask yourself. Do I want to do this? And when you think about, if you want to help somebody, okay, I want to help them, but how much time, for instance, do I have to be able to give them? You need to ask yourself that. So before we go on further, I'd just like those who are participating at the moment to put in the chat box, can they think of a time when they've done something and they've actually resented saying yes, when actually what they wanted to say was no?
So whilst people are answering, Bev, for me, when I'm really tired and I just want to have some downtime and I feel guilty about having that downtime, and then people are then demanding my time and attention, I do regret sometimes agreeing to do something that I don't want to do when I really need to put myself first. And over the years, I've done that many a time. And
Yes.
also at work, when you're trying to please your boss and you don't say no, or you feel like you can't say no. I've often gone home and felt really agitated that I haven't been able to say no, and it's really affected me.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a perfect example, Chris. And thank you for sharing that. Let's quickly go into the chat box and see what's there. So somebody said, yes, going out with friends to a party when they're extremely tired. Absolutely. And that's another great example. So in both those examples, what you've put forward, Chris, and what the person has in the chat box has put forward, it's really good practice to sit there. And when somebody asks you to do something, just sit with, what do I want to do? Now, I said, just sit there and think, what do I want to do? Sounds so easy, and it's not. Because if, like Chris, in your position, I'm tired, I can't do it now. Sometimes it's finding those words to actually say to yourself before you've even spoken to somebody, I need this time. I need to be able to have this space. So have you been able to, Chris, think of a time where you've actually said to somebody, I can help you, but not now, and given them an alternative of when you can come back and support them?
Yeah, I have learned over the years that my needs, I need to listen to them. And again,
Yeah.
with family, A is put in the comments, and you can come back to her in a moment, is that we've spoke about this before, putting your own oxygen mask on first. So it's about understanding your own needs and being able to say, I really love to, but right at this moment in time I can't, or I've already booked myself in at that time on that day, but here's some other options. What now suits you? Because I can't commit myself right at this time because I've got another commitment. So when would it be suitable in the future? And that's how I've got round it.
Yes. Yeah. So you've listened to yourself, you've acknowledged yourself, but you've also acknowledged the other person and given them an alternative. Now, in the chat box, A has said, in my case, offering my resources, e.g. time, money, and material possessions, knowing I don't want to share those things, especially with family. And family dynamics is something that I'm really passionate about, because why is it that just because it's under the umbrella of family, that we're given messages all around us that we have to accept bad behavior, or we have to give everything because they're our family? Whereas actually, no, think of yourself first of all. You know, I'm just trying to think of scenarios, you know, that your family may be asking too much for you. When you say, no, I can't do it, there will be times when your family won't like it. So I'm not going to make that easy. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And that, when you think of our children, is a boundary. When we say to our children, if you don't do this, I'll do that. Or when it's no, it's bedtime, and they don't like it, what do? Just say, oh, that's okay. You can stay up all night. So we need to be really clear with ourselves as what's important. What is it that we want? So when we've talked about this, yes, going out with friends to a party when I was extremely tired. What I do now is, if I ask myself, do I want to go? I will actually say, and I did this a couple of weeks ago, yes, I'll come along. And I often drive then so that I can leave when I'm ready. So I'm saying about when I'm managing the expectations for other people, but I'm doing what is right for me. With family, you know, offering my resources, time, money, and material. Whenever you do that, be clear in yourself what it is that you are offering and how much, and if you want to at all. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. So I'm just very aware I'm doing a lot of talking at the moment. And if there's anything that comes to mind specifically, put it in the chat and we can have a look at it. So Chris, can you think of a boundary that not you necessarily, that has maybe been shared in the group, that has come up several times and it's a familiar pattern that you see?
I think it's just being able to have the confidence to put the boundary, whatever it is, in place in the first instance, and keeping to it when people around you are chipping away at it, and literally, because they don't like the boundary that you put in place,
Yeah.
they've chipped away at it, and it's weakened your resolve to be strong, and then you're walked all over, and you then berate yourself because you've not been strong enough to uphold that boundary, because people have literally worn you down, I think.
And I think that's really good. Thank you, Chris. And I think sometimes what we do there as well, we try to over explain our reasons, and actually we don't need to. What we need to be able to, first of all, is, as I've said, I'm going to reiterate it, is hear ourselves, acknowledge what we want to do, okay? And then when we explain it, don't over explain it. So for instance, if a member, you know, and I'm going to pull on some of my own experiences, if a member of my family has asked me to do something that I don't agree with, I will just say, yeah, not even I'm sorry. I went to see, that's what we naturally do. We say, I'm sorry. And I stopped myself then because I got out of that habit. But I just say, thank you for asking me. However, I'm not able to help you at this particular time. And if they don't like it and they haven't liked it, who else can help you? Or if I've been asked for money, and I'm thinking about a certain person here, I'm asked for money. I don't have that money available for you at the moment. Maybe you can ask somebody else. Can you see the answer there? You're still acknowledging them. And when they keep coming back at you, you just say the same thing. I've told you my answer, thank you. It's not going to change. And that way you're not engaging all the time, and even walk away. Because the worst thing is when we start to put boundaries in, is when other people don't like our answer, they will sometimes keep badgering you. So take yourself away. Now, what tools can we use? Well, you know me for note 6, and I'm just looking.
Before you move on, there's a question that's just been asked in the chat.
Okay, let me go into the chat. How do you set boundaries with extremely difficult people? Well, this will help you. Okay, this will help you. So I'm just going to my note sticks, or post-it notes as they're known. And this is a tool that I use and I've been using it for years. Okay. And I'm just looking for this one because it's one. Here we go. Now, this is one, if you can see the camera, that I've used for many a time. I've used it in self-care, but I've also used it when setting boundaries, especially with extremely difficult people. So if I'm in a scenario and I'm being asked something, what does Beverley want? And I've found that this has been really useful to me. And it's okay to say to somebody, I hear you, I need time to think about this. You haven't said yes or no, but it's okay to walk away. Because sometimes we need that, especially when someone's being very challenging and very in your face. So walk away, write it down. What does A want? What does M want? What does anyone want? Thinking about yourself. Then when you go back, I would actually, and I have done this as well, especially when they're difficult people, I've actually written down what it is I want to say. I've also written down the other options. I haven't told the other options all the time. And that's if there are other options. There might not be other options. So I find by having it written down, then when I speak to the person, I think about where I'm speaking to them at. Is it over the phone? Is it on text? Is it to their face? Am I comfortable where I'm speaking to them? Do I have what I need next to me? So I've really thought about it, and that really helps me with my resolve. How long do I want to spend with them, telling them? Now, that's a question that's important. And these are lots of questions to ask yourself. And trust me, they become natural. So when someone keeps going on, I've told you my answer. I'm going to go now. Thank you. And even if they're following, take yourself to the toilet. I've done that before as well. So in the chat box, is there any other questions? Because one of the things that would be really useful for me to understand is I don't want to just be seen as talking. If you've got any specific questions, feel free to ask me, because we can look at different scenarios, because that always helps, and it helps to unpick it. So when I say to you about thinking about what you want, how does that feel to you? And if you could put it in the chat box, do you understand what I'm saying there? So I don't know if anyone's writing in at the moment. Chris, what about you?
So I just put my hand up because I just wanted to butt in whilst people are typing, if they are typing, is the actual definition of a boundary is a line which marks the limits. It's a dividing line. So maybe people can think of like a visualization of drawing a line in the sand, and literally that's the boundary. So whatever it is you want to put in place, and just keeping that as a visual. No, this is my boundary, and you're really getting close to the mark now. So I'm going to push back against that and actually say to you, no, I've said da 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 da, and keep saying what it is. So they get the message, no matter what they keep coming back at you with, that's the message, and just keep saying it. And they soon get sick and tired of hearing it if you keep reinforcing it.
Absolutely. And there's a rule of thumb here, and that's a really good example, what you said about the visualization of the line in the sand. But if you think about it, if somebody keeps coming to you and at 3 different times you're reiterating that boundary, the first time they may push and push and push, because they know that in the past that they've done that and they've been able to get away with it. If you stand still, they'll probably go, and I'm speaking metaphorically, if you stand literally behind that line, no, this is my answer, and keep reinforcing it, that's my answer, it's not going to change, they may go off with a bit of the hump. The second time they'll come back to you and you reiterate that again, it will be a shorter time before they go away. The third time, when you say no, they're probably unlikely to argue with you and just go away, because what you've done there is clarified your boundary, but you've done it with actions, not just words. So now I've said that, and following on from that great example that Chris gave, can you think of anything that you've done in the past where you have put a boundary down and it did work in the end? Chris, is there anything that's come to mind for yourself?
Yeah, there is. But going on from what you've just said, either think about where it's worked, or think about and write about in the chat box where you've put something in place and it just hasn't worked, and then we can explore that a bit more in depth. But also, Bev, it says here, setting boundaries means knowing what one wants and expects from the people in their life and what they'll accept from them, and then clearly, concisely and calmly stating that. So it's so, say like we're in a relationship of domestic violence, yeah? And all we've experienced is the trashing of our boundaries, whatever they are. And most of us in these groups will have experienced some kinds of bullying or abuse of some type. So our boundaries have been trashed time and time again. So having an expectation of putting a boundary in place and seeing them not being broken is quite a weird experience for us to actually experience. So when it comes to us putting in place boundaries, we almost expect them to be trashed or not adhered to. So there's a lot of that going on for many people as well. So it takes practice, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, I don't mind sharing because this is within a support peer-to-peer group. You know, I've been in a domestic violence relationship, and I'll also tell you, I didn't actually know. I just thought that he had a bit of a temper. He only hit me the once. You know, all the cliches that you hear, I went through, and it was when I'd had enough. I was in a relationship, I was married. He is the father of my children, and the threats were always there. And just one time I thought, I've had enough, no more. It was like, there wasn't anything big and lightning, it was just no more. And once I got to that stage, it really made a difference. So the next time he said something to me, I just walked away. Now, that was really, really scary because I sort of expected him to come charging after me and be violent towards me. He didn't. He was just as shocked. So when I put my boundaries in place, I didn't shout, I didn't scream. I did it silently, but I did it with my actions. So if I was on the phone to him, for instance, I remember another time, he was really swearing at me, calling me names. He always did that. But I just quietly said, if you continue speaking to me in that manner, I'm going to put the phone down. And he obviously called me names. I put the phone down. And I remember feeling really, really scared, thinking, what's going to happen now? Thinking like, I'm really going to get punished for this. And in all fairness, that's a message that I learned as being a child. But actually, the shock factor, he was more shocked. But it meant then I had to reiterate it. So the next time that happened, I said the same again. If you speak to me like that, I will put the phone down. And as soon as he did it, put the phone down. It was only also when somebody else, when I was getting nervous about something, somebody gave me some information and I got support and I was able to get police protection. And again, it was showing my boundaries were set. This is it, no more. But I didn't know how to do it on my own. So it's like doing this workshop. This is about learning. This is about hearing other people and thinking, oh, okay, I do have a choice. And we don't have a choice in every circumstance, but I have a choice to say, what do I want? What boundary is important to me? Because it is really important. It's about giving yourself the choice. And one thing you say, Chris, and I think it, for me, when you talk about this in the workshop, so anyone listening, is when we talk about responsibility, it can feel really, really heavy and really daunting.
Triggering.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love how you switch it around and you say about having the ability to respond.
Yeah, differently.
And that's very much about boundaries. Rather than allowing someone to keep breaking them all the time, it's about changing it around and actually, no, do I want to be treated like this? You know, am I prepared for my boundaries to be completely ignored, for me to be mistreated? So A is put in the chat box, I found that my boundaries were only respected once things escalated to the authorities. However, I do want to avoid things going to this level in the future. Absolutely. And that's not unusual to want to feel that you're only being heard once somebody else is behind you. And that's why it's so important to ask yourself, what do you want? Because when you know what you want, you can actually communicate that to somebody and get support. So, for instance, my ex-husband was very violent, and yet, ironically, his dad, my father-in-law, he was really frightened of. And once I went to my father-in-law and said, I need your help, that was a game changer for me. So
There's another comment.
Let's have a look. A situation that I am in at the moment, I'm currently dating. However, I want to avoid it being just a sexual situation. And I've stated that as I want and deserve more, but it still seems to be going that way. And I'm struggling to find the words to approach the situation again to reaffirm my boundaries. Do you know what? That is so common. Okay. That is so common. And with any boundary, the boundaries can change as and when you're ready. They don't always have to stay the same, but it's always, always your choice. And in a sexual situation, consent is the biggest thing. Okay. So one of the things that I have looked at in the past in a sexual situation is, what do I want? Am I ready? Do I want to have sex tonight or with this person? And even though I'm married now, that doesn't change. So it's not just about at the beginning of a relationship, it's also whilst you're in a relationship. And I personally, for me, every single time somebody wants to have sexual intimacy with you, you're able to set your boundary on what you want to do at that time. So to reaffirm your boundaries, if somebody, I'm trying to think of a scenario. So if somebody, you come home from work, you're tired, but somebody wants to have sex, you're in a relationship, somebody wants to have sex with you, it's okay to say, actually, either you do, but you want time beforehand, or no, I'm too tired, actually. Another time would be better. You don't even have to give an answer as to why you're making that boundary. But if we're doing it and we're afraid to say something because of the consequences, then is that person actually really considering you? Chris, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, I think also if it's a new relationship and you're trying to test out your boundaries because they've been trashed in prior relationships, you've got every right to say, you know what, I need this relationship to be nurturing, and to me it looks like this. You need to dine me, you need to give me flowers, whatever it is that you want, say it. Don't be frightened of saying it, because if that is truly what you want, sometimes you have to express it, sometimes you have to say it. And if then that they follow up with that, like in a genuine nice way, without the expectation of the sexual relationship being part of that, then you know that this is maybe a relationship that's going to truly work out in the way that you want it. And if they don't do what you expect them to do, then it might not be the right relationship for you at this time. And I think we've always said, Beverley, haven't we, in everything that we've done, the relationship with yourself is the most important, because when you understand that you are worthy, that you are deserving of X, Y, and Z, and you go from that place, then everybody around you needs to respect that, and they will respect that when you are leading from that place.
Absolutely. And I'll give another example. We're all together. My current husband, when I first met him, we had the first date, the second date, the third date, and they'd gone on for hours, and I'd always made sure that I was safe, etc. And then he was inviting me to go out for dinner, and he lived a long way away. So I said, I'm happy to come down for dinner, but I just need to understand where I'll be sleeping. So with that, that gave me the opportunity to see how he was going to respond. And in my mind, I'd given a clear boundary. So he responded and said, "You'll obviously be sleeping in my room, but I will be sleeping downstairs." Fantastic. When I got there, his clothes to go out for the night were downstairs in the sitting room. He made that very clear. For me, I'd been heard, he'd respected my boundaries, and it made a big difference. After the meal, we went for a walk, and we had what was, and I'm not going to lie, a really cringy conversation, because he wanted to be really sure of my boundaries. And I'm so pleased that it was dark, because I'd never had such an open conversation about intimacy with someone. But he was quite right, very right. He said, if we're going to be in a relationship, I want to understand what's important to you intimately and sexually, and what you like and what you don't. And I was, as much as I talk about boundaries, and as much as I felt that I'd really gone far, to actually have someone ask, oh my God, I think in that time I knew that I was going to be with this man forever, because he was actually asking and reaffirming. That doesn't mean to say I don't have to put my boundaries in now, because occasionally I had to say, oi.
Yeah. Watch what you're saying to me, because it's actually coming across like this. I don't know if you understand that that's what is actually playing out here.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we have arguments. You know, he crossed a boundary, kept doing it little bit. And then I had to have a word with myself, because I realised, oh, you're getting really shitty at the moment. And then I realised it was because, oh, hold on, I feel like taking the mickey a little bit. So it was me, like, what is you want? And actually, when I communicated that, he didn't like it at first, but I went, I've told you exactly how I feel. I'm now going out for a walk, because I needed to go out for a walk, and give myself time to think about this, but also give you time to process it. And when we came back together, it was not an issue. So everything I'm saying is something I put into place all the time. Go on, Chris.
And I just think clear communication is key, isn't it? Because
Oh,
when we don't clearly communicate, and when we don't feel heard, some of us will implode and some of us will literally explode. And I've been in both situations personally. And when I explode, everybody takes cover in the past, because I'm like a volcano going off. And I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. So I've had to actually understand that if there was a pattern, and there was, don't let it get that far. So what do you need to do differently? How do you need to respond differently? What is it you need? What is it do you need to communicate? And it's almost like, let me take my children as an example. So they know how to wind me up, but it goes to a certain point and I go, oi, nah, no, wind your neck in. This is going too far now. So that they know that, there's stretching of a boundary, but then there's not going past it, because otherwise mum will lose her cool. And when she loses her cool, you're not going to like it. So before I get to losing my cool, my volcano going off, because I don't like going there, I will just go, oi, wind your neck in. That's enough now. So, you're going to get people within the family, like the scenario that I've just described, where there's a bit of elasticity around that boundary, but then there is that cut off where you go, no, this is not happening anymore. Yeah,
absolutely. And there are some people that don't want to listen to your boundaries. Let's be honest, they don't want to listen. And we're frightened that if we put our boundary in place, we're going to lose them. That can be with friendships, that can be in relationships, that can be with children. Again, I've got a sibling, I'm just going to say, not a sibling, I've got a child who's deep in addiction. And boundaries there are so, so hard because you're dealing with an addiction there. But this is a real prime example. Or it may be that someone's, you know, a real narcissist and they're just not going to listen to you. But we still find ourselves wanting them to be in our lives because we're frightened. If we say no, they won't like us. You know, when we don't feel worthy enough, we're actually frightened of losing them. One of the things that I've come to terms with, and even with my child that's in addiction, well, actually, have you actually got a relationship with them? Do you really want a relationship with someone who doesn't listen to you, that doesn't respect your boundaries? And with my child who's in addiction, I've actually had to learn, right, again, this is behavior that I will accept when I'm in your company. But if I see you, and I've seen him at his worst, if I see that you're taking drugs, if I come to meet you and you're off your head, I'm just going to say goodbye and I'm going to go. And I've done that. If I've been on the phone, I've done that. And you know what? It's not nice. But when they start to change their behavior and they start to respect you and you come back and it's such a different relationship. It's not a relationship that you feel you're hanging on to with fingertips. And we often do that. Especially if we've gone through abuse, we're people pleasing. We don't want people to think the worst of us because we already think the worst of ourselves anyway. Chris.
I was just going to bring in another definition here, Beverley, because I just think it helps everybody. I think it says personal boundaries. These are the physical, emotional, and mental limits we establish to protect ourselves from being manipulated, used, or violated by others. And I've also written a note for myself. When your boundaries are being trashed over and over, it can affect your mental and physical well-being. And we can take a scenario just at work, for example, when our boss is potentially just dumping on us all of the time, or our colleagues are dumping on us all of the time. That can really affect our self-esteem and our well-being. And that's just one example of a relationship that is work related. But then you've shared, Beverley, so eloquently, where your ex trashed your boundaries over and over again. And we've all got examples of where we might not feel we had a boundary in place, but we know how we feel when people step on us and take from us over and over again. And in order to protect ourselves, we need to start looking at what we can put in place so that we definitely are able to understand and protect ourselves better.
Absolutely. I'm going to give another example of a boundary. It's something we all do. And this is no judgment to anyone. We all do it. We become overwhelmed as well. So I'm just thinking of a client of mine and they wanted to date. So this will help with A as well. They wanted to go back into the dating scenario and they hadn't for a long time. And they were asked to go somewhere on on first date, but they felt it was too far away. They didn't feel safe. It meant that they had to get a taxi, etc. And I said, okay. And they were worried about getting back. So I said, it's a first date. Let's take away everything. What is it you would really love to do on your first date? And they said, I'd like to go for coffee for an hour and know that it's somewhere that I feel comfortable. And I said, what's stopping you doing that? And they were really surprised because they actually realised that what they did, and they'd always been doing, is asking the other person what they want and going along with what they wanted right from the beginning of the relationship. So then I said, okay, you said about what you'd really like to do. Have you considered communicating that? And they communicated it. Now, what was ironic, the first person didn't want to do that. And they straight away said, thank you, but no thank you. The second person, when they suggested that, said, yes, that would be lovely. And actually, I'm really relieved because I get really nervous on dates. And they went on a date and it was really good. They made a decision after a few weeks that that person wasn't right for them, but they felt so much more empowered. They were making choices and communicating. So, think about that when you're talking about your boundaries, when you're thinking about your level, ask yourself what you really want so that when it gets to you said you want to avoid going to the level of it escalating. Think about where your line is in the sand, as Chris so eloquently said earlier. What is my acceptable level of my boundary, and what is the absolutely not? And if they don't like it, yeah, they might sulk. Let them sulk. You know, I love that saying, and I've had to put that in practice with my children hugely. If you love someone truly, let them go. Because if someone doesn't like your boundaries, let them go. But it's amazing what happens when you come back to each other. So in work, if your manager's asking you to do something and it is way above your boundaries and you say no, and you're finding your manager is really not treating you respectfully, you can go to the management. But what I always think is, if I'm in a job and I'm really not happy, find another job and be clear with your boundaries. Thank you. It said, I prefer this definition, It says it covers broader, deeper aspects that I think many people need to consider. Absolutely. We really underestimate how important boundaries are. And it's something that we need to go away and think about. And even I can say, and I really don't want to upset anyone about this, I remember a year after leaving my husband, I got very upset because, yes, I was in an abusive relationship. But then a year later, it really came to me in a conversation with somebody that actually, not that I'd allowed the abuse, but I'd allowed myself to not ask myself what boundaries were important to me. So I hadn't allowed the abuse. So I really want to make this clear because some people will find this hard to hear. But I really sat with myself and I got really upset when I realized how much I'd given away to somebody else who actually wasn't considering me.
Yeah.
So if that works for you,
Bev, isn't it? It's giving the power away that rightly belongs to you.
yeah, yeah. And when you think about it, it's so hard when we're feeling unworthy, when we're feeling full of shame, when we're feeling full of guilt from abuse. And let's be frank here, these are the realities. To be able to put yourself first is uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So I don't expect anyone to be part of tonight or watch this video and go, right, that's it. These are all my boundaries and I'm going to know. Start with the little things. You know, is there somebody at work that keeps using something of yours, like your favorite pen, or someone in the house that, you know, keeps using your perfume, you know, or, you know, think of those things. If they do, actually, you know, I appreciate it if you didn't use that pen. I do have others you can use, or buy them a pen and say, and I know you like this pen because you keep using mine, but here's yours. You know, it doesn't have to be all aggressive. Think about how you're going to relay it. And with your family, just think about what I said about the rule of three. This is your boundary. People might say, oh, but you've never done this before. No, you're quite right, but I am now. So you don't have to enter into an argument. This is your boundary and that's what's important to you. Chris, before we finish, because we've got 8 minutes left, and anybody who wants to type anything in, is there any last things that you would like to think about with boundaries?
It just says here, setting healthy boundaries helps maintain a sense of well-being and self-esteem. And I truly get that, and I appreciate that, because when my boundaries, even though I didn't even realize what they were and that I had expectations, I think expectations were my boundaries. Like, looking back and reflecting, I sort of had like, if I treat a person this way, that they will treat me back the same way, and that just is not the case for those that were trashing my boundaries or not meeting my expectations. So I got to learn that certain people, I only expect ABC from them, because they can't give me what I need, XYZ. So the relationship is on that level. And then my relationship with you, for example, we are open, we are free, we support each other, da di da di da. So I know that's a genuine, trusting, no barred, we can say anything, and we will pick up on each other if we need to. Like, I, you will tell me that I've overstepped the mark if needs be, and it's safe for us to do that. But I know with other people, for example, that relationship will never look like that, and that's fine. So you get to learn your boundaries can be different with different people for different reasons. And I think I want our participants to take that home, that it's not just one set of boundaries for all. It be a different set of boundaries for different individuals in different contexts.
Absolutely, so well said. And also, even though we're thinking about our boundaries, there are times you can't say it at that moment because it's not the right place. You're not in the right place emotionally. There are times when something may happen and I'll get my knickers in a twist and I'll get myself all angry and worked up. And I don't actually know why. And I need to walk away. And it may be that I need to go for a walk. I need to let the emotions sit down. And then I think, hold on a minute. I've found myself, I've said yes to something. I actually don't think I can do it. And I need to go back and have a conversation with that person. So don't expect that it's always going to be easy, because it's not. I'm not going to I was going to say bullshit, but I suppose we can. We're in a club. We're in a small group. So, let's be frank and honest about this. This takes time. So think about a small boundary that you want to put in place, and don't be afraid to say no. Because that may be a little word, but it's a big meaning.
So the question that I want to put to the participants, A and M, right now is, what one thing have they learned from our little conversation today that's going to be helpful for them?
Right. What about yourself, Chris?
It just brings to the fore really how important boundaries are, however small or big, and you can set a boundary anytime, and you can revisit a boundary anytime, depending on what your experiences are. And the more positive experiences you have, the easier it is to keep reinforcing and changing and amending.
Yeah. And one of the things, that I sometimes do as well is I think about the language that I'm using, because we all use different language, but sometimes this is where it comes back to vulnerability, having the courage to be vulnerable and explain to this person, if you're able to, why it's important to you. So when you do that, this is how it impacts me, and this is my reason. That's if you need to. And some people, I'll give them a reason, sometimes I won't. So each situation sometimes takes a different way of implementing the boundary. Or I don't know about you, Chris, sometimes it shows on my face.
It often shows on my face, unfortunately.
And there are times
really, you're gonna go there with me? Are you really?
sometimes you can explain it and say, and sometimes it's no. Okay, I've said no, that's it. And other times, like we said about in domestic violence, you know, it's not always easy. Sometimes, you know, sometimes we need someone else with us. And sometimes it's okay to set the boundary in front of someone else. Because if you are unable to feel safe when you're on your own, it's okay to say it when you've got someone with you. And that's important to consider. So we literally got 2 minutes and there's
So,
nothing else coming up.
there's a comment.
Yeah, I got that. A takeaway for me is that boundaries look different with each person, which seems like common sense. However, I've never looked at it in that way. And thank you, Em, because, you know, we all learn from each other. And it is something that, like you, years ago, I used to think it had to be one way, but it doesn't. Different people, different relationships, different scenarios. It's about what's right for you. Also, the importance of verbalizing my needs, which I'm not really great at. Oh, absolutely. And I remember that. So, you know, that's why start writing them down, because it really can be useful, because it helps you yourself find your words. And if you find that some people are very good with their words and can be quite tricky, keep your communication to a minimum so that you don't get caught up in their challenges. Because some people, you know, are very good at doing that, aren't they, Chris?
Yeah. And I think we don't know what we don't know, do we? But when we get new information or new learning, new experience, then we can do different because we know different.
Oh, hindsight. And, you know, I always say that knowledge is power in a positive way, and it gives
Yeah.
us so many different choices. So I think just clarifying, think of a boundary, think of, you know, what you're prepared to accept and what you're not. What
Yeah.
tools will help you? So if it's visualizing that line in the sand, this is it, that's the line. This is what I need from you, or this is what I want to happen. If you're unable to verbalize it first, what other tools do you have? You know, the note sticks, thinking about what your objective is. If it's that somebody's taking your pen that you like, I know it's only a small thing, but it's still important. What other options can you do? What choices can you make?
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Our next session is on Wednesday at 7 o'clock on the 7th. Isn't that right, Chris?
It is indeed. And you'll be going solo because I'm on holiday.
Oh, of course. So anybody listening, please come and join next Wednesday, okay? Because I am on my own and it'd be really good to have people with me. And remind me, Chris, what was the session for next week? I haven't
I
got my
can't
list
remember
here.
off the top of my head, but it's all in the group and I will remind everyone, so don't fret.
Yeah, and don't forget to send me the link before you go off on sunny holiday.
Don't worry, I will, don't worry. So thank you for all our participants for taking part today. And if you're watching this on replay, catch up, rewind, whatever it is, the word we use now, please write your questions in the group and I will let Beverley know and she can address them in the next workshop. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Bye for now, everyone.